And we are live. JT here. Welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to thank you, whether you are joining us live as we stream into our Facebook community, whether you are watching the replay on YouTube or on Facebook, or whether you're choosing to listen to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. Your mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. And here's my challenge to you, is to keep your mind wide open. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will most importantly help you succeed at the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest. Before we hopped on live, I asked him, I shared with him the memory of when we actually first met live and in person. And it's amazing just how, life continues to unfold and just all this divine timing. My guest in the huddle today is the assistant head coach. He is the defensive coordinator at McMaster University. My guest in the huddle today is Scott Brady. How are you today, brother?
I'm good, man. How you doing? I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've been looking forward to it. I've really come to appreciate your growth mindset and really looking forward into learning more about your journey today. So thank you.
My pleasure. Excited to chat with you.
Okay. So one of the things that I like to do, Coach, is I often remind myself that life is a daily practice. And one of my daily practices is to count my blessings. It just feels better. And one of the biggest blessings that I feel we can give anyone is to share our time and our energy with them. So again, I just really want to thank you for choosing to share some of your time and energy into being here with me and our community today. And again, really looking forward to diving a little bit deeper.
Awesome. Looking forward to it too.
Okay. So, Coach, I always like to start off with something fun. So one reminder that I like to remind myself and others is that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. So I'm curious, what is an interesting fact? I had a coaching colleague that said we all have our quirks, we all have our things. What is one maybe interesting fact about you that maybe a lot of people don't know about that you would be open to sharing with our community?
That's a good question. I feel like I got a few quirks for sure. I mean, the first two things that come to mind. So I'm big into like comic books, superheroes, Batman, X-Men, that type of thing. So if there's like a comic book movie or something that comes out, I'm probably the first in line to see it. And then, I mean, kind of tied into that, I think communicate a lot with like movie quotes or TV quotes, probably to a crazy extent. So I've got a couple group chats with people that, I mean, I think it would pain some people to see the number of just movie references in there. So, I mean, those are a couple of the quirks.
Okay. I love it. Now I'm curious, you piqued my interest. I love the movie, the comic book movies. Is there one that's like your go-to? It's a Sunday afternoon. You have 2 hours, like that's your go-to movie?
Yeah, Dark Knight for sure. That's always the go-to. That has to have been watched like 20 plus times at this point.
Great movie.
Yes.
Great movie. Okay. So I'm curious, Coach, sport has obviously played an important role for you in your life, right? I mean, you're still doing it today at a high level. So I'm curious, what has been the life lesson that you've taken from sport that you find yourself still applying to your life today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that honestly, what sports done a lot has reinforced a lot of the lessons that my parents taught me growing up. And so I think, especially in my coaching career, a lot of what I've relied on is just things I learned from them. So attention to detail, hard work, just generally trying to be a good person and build, authentic relationships with people. I think those have been, those have really carried me through my coaching career to this point. And a lot of it has been reinforced. They were lessons I learned from them, but it's being reinforced over my career. I think if I was going to pick, one specific from football, I think how you respond to adversity has probably been the biggest one. And I think one of the cool things with football, maybe more than a lot of other sports, is just how you bounce back from adversity is a huge part of your success. I think it's a really unique environment where you're only playing, one game a week, and we spend so much time preparing leading up to games. In other sports, maybe you're playing games back-to-back days or something like that. So you've got an immediate chance to kind of get over it and move on to the next one. With football, you spend so much time preparing. Really, the challenge is different. You're not necessarily refocusing to play another game, but you're refocusing to prepare to play another game, whether you won or lost. And there's so little time to enjoy or get bent out of shape about the previous result. So I just think one thing that I've definitely taken from football is just that, how you respond to adversity, or even sometimes how you respond to success, is hugely important.
I love that share. And what it really prompted me to think about is realizing, right, like football, right, is unique in the fact of, like you said, you play one game a week, and then there's so much preparation that happens, right, in the lead up to it. And then you have your game, and then it's sort of like this reset, as Coach Snyder talked about, like this reset mentality. So I'm curious with this adversity piece, right? And I think the last 2 years have been a great reminder about how life will present us with challenges, obstacles, setbacks, and it's really the ability to respond to adversity is so important. Was there a moment where you felt, maybe as an athlete or coach, that really helped you understand that idea, like the importance of being able to deal with adversity, being able to respond?
I don't know if there's been one, but there's been many moments that have, I think, reinforced that. And so I think back to, even when I was looking to go to university, I kind of always thought, at the time I was thinking maybe McMaster and I'd stay around home. Then I get injured my last summer season, I get injured right away my last high school season. And, nobody's talking to you at that point. So you have to take your recruiting into your own hands. And it led me down a great road where I ended up at Mount A, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. The relationships that you build there, it ended up being perfect for me. And then eventually transitioning into the coaching, getting to work with Coach Jeffrey there at the start of my career, I can't think of a better mentor to have. And none of that would have happened if not for how things worked out previous to that. And then even, at the start of my coaching career, the first season really that I was a coordinator, we weren't very good. And so when that happens, it makes you kind of reevaluate things and look at how you're doing everything, and, have to look at some pretty honest feedback. And so I think that, was a big contributor. Not having success early on, I think, was a huge contributor to my development. And then there's even been individual moments that make you better. So you brought up Coach Snyder, guys like him, Gaetan Richard at University of Western, some of the best coaches in the country. I mean, they are very good at their job too. And so there's been times where, they beat the brakes off us pretty good, and you have to take a long, hard look at the film. But I think when you look at it the right way, they make you better, because you come out the other side of it, they make you realize some issues with maybe what you're doing, and you end up growing a lot from it, and you end up better because of it. So I think, honestly, it hasn't been one experience. It's been a lot of experience of adversity, some big, some small, that have contributed.
Okay. It's interesting, Coach, and as you share, what came on the screen of my mind was that one of my favorite quotes, that Nelson Mandela quote, that I never lose, I either win or I learn. And listening to you share there, you could really tell that your ability to to challenge yourself to look at things objectively, right? From a place of facts, right? It seems like it's something that you value. So again, as someone who has played at a high level, someone who coaches at a high level, why is it so important to be able to be more objective and to maybe just look at things as they are, in terms of, instead of maybe like labeling it as like good or bad, or just, creating some story, some narrative? So I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think of when you bring that up, so I think about this story quite a bit, but when we were I'll go back to Mount A here. We were bad for a long time previous to having like a pretty good run there. And so 2014 was the first year that we won, conference championship in like 20 years or something like that. But, I think a lot of people forget we started that season 1-4. And honestly, one of the biggest lessons I pulled from that, we started 1-4. We won our last 3 games, 4-4. We went a good run through the playoffs. On the other side of that, we didn't know it at the time, but that started a run of like 18 or 19 straight conference games that we won. And so it went, like 2.5 years before we lost in conference again after that. And so at the time, when we won that first championship, everybody their question was kind of like, what happened after that game? The game that sent us to 1-4 that started this run. I think everybody was looking for, was there some big, like theatrical moment or impassioned speech or something? And it really wasn't. Like we got our butt kicked that last game, and our head coach at the time, Coach Jeffrey, like the thing I love is there was no big monumental moment where at the time you're thinking this is going to turn everything around. We just really stayed the course, and we went back to work the next day, and we kept the same plan that we had, and just refocus and try to do better, like paying better attention to the details, guys working harder, doing a better job with their preparation, us doing a better job preparing the guys the right way for the game. And I think a lot of times, people want to make it some big thing that has to happen. But I really think if you just stay the course and commit to doing things the right way day in and day out, you don't know when it's going to pay off, but I believe it does sooner than later.
It's interesting, and I know we talk about this, and what I really heard from you is that sports cliche, right? Where they always say, trust the process. But, I'm always like, what does it mean to trust the process? And like you talked about, you said it was asking those tough questions, like, what can we do to have greater attention detail, right? From the athletes, what can we do to be more attention to detail to prepare our athletes even better, right? And it's interesting that when you sort of focus on what you can control, it's interesting how the results, like you said, take care of itself, taking a guess onto when, but it will happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think big thing we try to focus on with our guys is just, to your point, I think people talk about like process and culture are 2 big buzzwords, and they're not inherently bad. They are important, but I think a lot of time it's easy to just fall back on trust the process, but like, are you really defining it for the guys day in and day out? So I think as an example, a big one that comes up in coaching is, coaches will tell players like, you have to watch more film, but like, are we doing everything in our power to make sure that we're instructing, like, here's what you should be doing when you're watching film, like here's the cut-ups you should be watching this day of the week, that day of the week, here's the things that you should be looking for. And so I mean, culture is critically important, and like you can't overcome a terrible culture, but I think it's important that you're defining what it is for the guys, and then obviously that it's real and genuine and authentic and being lived every day, and at the end of the day that the daily actions and habits are matching up with what you say your culture is.
I love that. I love how you talk about that, right? Again, a lot of the nature of what I do with my clients is that around this idea of like habits, right? Are your habits, are they effective? Are they focused, right? So I'm curious with you, how important is it to, have those when you're trying to create a culture? Because again, you're part of a changing culture at Mount A, right? And now you're at a culture at McMaster that, breeds excellence, So what have you learned about creating culture, building culture, getting to that next level of culture? Like, what has been your biggest, takeaway during your coaching career?
So I think the biggest takeaway is that it's critically important. I don't think you can have success without it. I think it's pretty much what I said. A lot of times people just rely on culture and without defining what it is, but it's literally just like your daily actions and habits. And so like we talk to the guys all the time. One of my favorite quotes is like essentially your choices are showing me what you believe, right? Your words, it doesn't matter what you're saying, like your choices are demonstrating what you actually believe. And I think when you're building a culture, you're just trying to, you want to make sure that it's genuine. I think if you're trying to create something that the guys don't believe themselves or they don't view themselves as, it's not going to fail. So it has to be genuine and authentic for the place that you're at and the people that are there. And then it's got to be reflected in your actions every day. And that's both from the players and coaches. So, if we're saying one thing and then doing something different, it doesn't matter what we're giving voice to in terms of the culture. They're going to follow our actions and they're going to follow our lead. So when you talk about, work ethic, preparation, attention to detail, it starts with the leaders. It probably starts with the coaches, and you have to make sure that you're living it. And then you have to see it from the leadership group within the team, and then it carries through the rest of the team. But I really think the most important thing is just defining those daily habits and those daily actions that the guys need to carry out, and making sure like you're always going back and checking, like, are we still living what we say our culture is?
I love it. And again, that came up a few times where you're talking about, like, I heard this idea of like, are you demonstrating it, right? Are you embodying, right? Those characteristics, those qualities, right? Are you, and why that resonates with me so much is I'm a firm believer that, great leaders only preach what they are willing to consistently practice themselves, right? And it's really easy to, to give someone feedback, but can you actually live it? Can you practice it? Can you embody it on a daily basis? So I'm curious with you again, was there someone that really reinforced that idea for you? Like, I know you said your parents were big mentors and role models for you, right? And you also talked about some other coaches. Was there like a moment where you really like, okay, I get it. Like, I have to live it. I have to breathe it. I have to be willing to practice it myself.
I think it's honestly just being reinforced, like with a lot of different mentors that I have. So like it started with my parents for sure. And, again, seeing their work ethic, their attention to detail, like how they approach their life every single day, I think has had the biggest influence on me for sure. I think I was really, really fortunate when I started out with Kelly Jeffrey at Mount A. He's had a huge impact on me. And I think the biggest thing with him, he was just a pro through and through. And so his thing was always like, he showed us how to do things the right way. He was very professional with us, and he gave us a lot of encouragement and really showed us how to be a coach, right? Like what your daily actions need to look like, what it should be like at practice, what the preparation through the week needs to be like, interactions with players, how to structure a program. A lot of that came from him. I've been really fortunate since then to work with some really good coaches. So working with Greg and working with Steph now at McMaster, they've had a huge influence. I think with Steph, one of the big things that's been reinforced with him is just that authenticity piece. And so, at first when I became a head coach, like the only one I had worked for was Kelly. And so that obviously had a huge impact on me. But now I think that you have a chance to work with other people and get to see other people's take on what a program needs to look like and what the structure of everything needs to look like. I think the biggest takeaway from all of that is that authenticity is the most important thing. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think as a leader, it starts with who you are first and foremost. And I think people generally have a good sense of if what they're seeing is authentic or not. So, it's that old saying, like, who you are is how you lead. I think that's true. And I think they all do it a bit different way. What I love about Steph is that he's exactly the man in private that he shows in public. He's the same guy every single day. And he's also, helped me learn the value in having different personalities around the program as well. Right. And so he's pretty self-aware of what his strengths, weaknesses are, all those type of things. And he wants to have people around who complement him, who fill in the gaps that maybe he has as an individual. And I think that strengthens the program as a whole. And then, beyond just the head coaches, some of the assistant coaches I've worked with, like, again, Gaetan Richard's probably the biggest one. He's one of my best friends. And, I think, again, seeing his work ethic, the way he goes about his business at day in and day out, and genuinely holds himself to like a very, very high internal standard, and tries to do everything he can to make the guys better day in and day out, has had a huge impact. And then there's other guys, like Corey Grant, his energy with guys, same with Chris Hopkins. That those guys, I think, both do a fantastic job of towing the line between like really loving the guys, caring about them, showing that they're important to them, but then also being able to hold them accountable and push them to get better. And then Todd Galloway is another one, like, seeing, even though he wasn't in a head coach role when he was with us, I saw the structure that he had in place for the program when he was at Guelph, and he brought some of that structure into McMaster, and it definitely made us better, especially with respect to recruiting and how you structure recruiting visits and all that. So at every level, I've just been like really fortunate to be around some really good people. And I think you pull things from every single one of them.
I love that, coach. And it's interesting, like, as you're sharing some of those names, right? The coaches, what I love about it is not only are they great football coaches, but to me, they're even greater men, right? Like they really are, like you said, they are who you see them are, right? Like they practice it, they live it, right? Outside of, away from the football field. So I guess my question to you, again, you've obviously had the opportunity to work with, coach, right? Be coached by some amazing, coaches and mentors. I'm curious, from your perspective, your lived experience, how important is it to surround yourself with other strong and powerful leaders? Like, is that important in order to really hit in terms of, your next level of greatness?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I think that I look at kind of steps in my own development, and a lot of them can be traced to when I got around like the next person, because they have a different way of looking at things. They present something different. I think you can pull good from pretty much everybody. I think it's important to surround yourself with not like-minded people. You want them to have a different take on things, and you want to be able to challenge each other's ideas, but you want them to care on the same level that you do and prioritize some of the same values and what it should look like day in and day out. You want them to be willing to speak up and challenge things so that you can all, not in a combative way, but in a competitive way where you're all trying to just get the very best idea that you possibly can, the best way to present it to the guys, whatever the case is. And again, I go back to that experience in Mount A. Like, I don't know that I appreciated it at the time. I do now, more so in hindsight, but we had a really, really good group there. And, between Kelly as the head coach, but then like Gaetan was our offensive coordinator, Chris Hopkins, he was working with our line and recruiting and special teams, and then Brandon Dubs, who's at St. Mary's now, special teams coordinator. So we didn't, I think you take it for granted at the time, but we had, like 4 or 5 good young coaches there who have all spread out throughout the country. And it was just a really fun time. Like, the part that I miss about it is now, with Hoppy and Gates in the conference, you miss some of the discussions you were able to have before, like where you were just sitting in a room and talking football and, throwing ideas back and forth. Now you have to compete against those guys. So you miss some of those conversations. You try to recreate them as much as you can. I think if I had to go back, I would really appreciate that time when we were all together a little bit more. But to your point, I think as much as we all want to think like I'm responsible for my own success, I think a huge part of it is who you surround yourself with, and getting around really good people. And I love how Steph's talks about being a good person in a competitive environment. I think that's a really good phrasing. And that's, what he looks for with assistant coaches, because it's easy to be, maybe a good person when things are going well, but what does it look like when you get your butt kicked? What does it look like when you're faced with adversity or different challenges? And I do think if you have good, well-meaning people who want to work hard and are dedicated to kids, like, you can get a lot done.
Mm-hmm. I love that share. And what really came up for me as you were sort of tying it all up there at the end was that idea of like, it's easy to be positive when things are going well, right? Giving a football analogy, it's easy to be positive and be rah and cheering your teammates on when you're up by 14. The question I have is, can you still demonstrate that same great attitude when you're down by 14, when you're down by 28, if you're down by 35, right? And like you said, that's the power of having that great attitude. So I'm curious, one thing that you mentioned was, the importance of surrounding yourself with people who challenge you, right, in a loving way, and that's that hold you accountable, right? And that's the power of great mentors. I think it's an interesting time because we live in a world right now that's curated, right? You just think of social, that it's sort of everything's funneled to where we only surround ourselves with like-minded people. In today's interesting time, from your experience, how important is it to be able to be around other people who may not share your same opinion, who might bring a diversity of thought? Like, is that something that you feel is really important to grow?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So, I think a great example of that I see is even going through our own challenges, like on the EDI side at McMaster. And so, Corey Grant has done some incredible work on the EDI side with the BIPOC community and everything else. And one of the great things, like after George Floyd and, we all were like pretty captivated at the time watching TV and seeing, the massive protests in the States and everything else. It was a really challenging time for us. And one of the things that I got to see in our own program is watching Corey really take control, and the time investment that he made with our guys, starting with, our BIPOC players on the team, but then eventually including all the coaches, all the players on the team. I know for me personally, like I gained so much more insight to their experience that I didn't have before. And you think that you maybe do at the time, but when you hear them speak, you hear some of the guys speak about their own challenges or their own feelings on the situation, it does change your perspective on things. And so I think seeing the work that Corey has done in our own locker room, and it's grown beyond that now, has made a huge impact on me. And you see the value in making sure that, if you're going to have all people from all different backgrounds, walks of life in your locker room, are you really doing the best job you can to take care of those guys if you are not surrounding them with people who are like them at the front of the room? And so making sure that, there's diversity within the coaching staff, that they're seeing people like them from similar backgrounds, I think is really important. In your head, you feel like you're doing the best job you can to take care of the guys. But, in the last couple of years, living through some of that, you start to reevaluate things and maybe look at things a little differently. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure you're taking the best possible care of the guys in the program. And now you're a little bit more aware that there's other things that need to be done to make sure that's actually happening.
I love that, Coach. And what I really love, like what I'm really hearing and feeling from you, is that ability to, like you talked about this, to reevaluate, reassess. And that's such an important part of the growth process, right? It's really accepting that up to this point, yeah, you are doing the best you can based on your information, based on your lived experience, but really being able to challenge yourself by saying, what can I do better today? Right? Like that's a powerful question, right? And I think that really has to happen for change to occur. So I'm curious, what has it been like for you, right, at McMaster? And one of the cool things, I actually posted a clip today on social with Coach Ruler sharing about how she came to find it. I think one of the beautiful things about the staff at McMaster is it is very reflective. I believe it is as diverse, right, and inclusive staff as any staff in the country. So what has it been like, sort of like really being immersed into a staff that really is trying to be the change?
It's been fun and it's been really enlightening. Like you said, it just, you start to, you start to have people with all different views because they come from different backgrounds or certain circumstances around. So you do have more people who look at things differently. They see challenges that you're maybe blind to. They have different ideas to make things better. And then, you know, just from a personal growth standpoint, like, again, you talk about Amanda or Taylor coming into our program. One of the things I love is like when we're sitting there watching film at like 11 at night after practice, like they're right there with us. Like they're as invested as we are. It's important to them. It's a huge passion that they have that they maybe haven't had access to in the past. And they're just like so enthused by having the opportunity to be around and to see the time investment that they make and the way they've been able to make the staff in the locker room better. And then a big one is not just on staff, but it carries through the players. And so I think it's going to influence how they see the world going forward, right? And they're much more aware of those things than they maybe have been in the past. So I think it's had a huge impact at like every single level of our program.
I think it's interesting. Like I just think about probably some of the how fun those meetings are, right? Because you have people that truly celebrate growth, that really just want to make this world a better place. I think it would be amazing just to be a fly in the wall in those meetings. So I'm curious here. You mentioned the players, right? Like how it's making a better experience not only for the coaches and the players as well, right? It's giving them greater perspective, right? Maybe even shifting some perspectives. Has there been a moment during this time where you've really kind of said, this is why you have to be the change. This is why you need to practice. This is why you have to sort of be willing to, why you can only preach what you're willing to consistently practice. Has there been a moment where you've seen an athlete and they're like, I get it. This is why we needed to do this.
Yeah. So I think, again, it's not one moment, but what drives it home for me is you see and hear some of the feedback from some of the guys on our team who now all of a sudden feel like they have a voice that maybe didn't before. And you see, I can think of a couple guys in particular who you really have seen come out of their shell, take on a much bigger leadership role, and in some cases be willing to say when they've seen something that, you know, it could be done a better way, and watching them speak up and grow as leaders in our team. I think that's always the coolest thing for me, is just seeing our players come into their own and really start to find their voice and figure out how they're going to, you know, leave their own mark, leave their own legacy, make an impact on our team, you know, community within the school, you know, even Hamilton. So as you start to see some of those experiences where guys are, you know, finding their voice and creating the change that they want so that they can make our locker room better, it's fun to watch.
You know, it's interesting. You know, what I really heard from you, right, is, you know, football is sort of like the canvas we're playing with here, but it's really seeing them sort of like step into who they, right, to utilize their gifts, their talents, their abilities, right, and really looking to become that voice and really just seeing them really truly reach their potential. That's what it sounds like to me. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can think of one guy on our team in particular, and I'll embarrass him a little bit, but like Nania Serba had our free safety.
Yeah.
From where he was his first year to where he is now, as I mean, we joke about it a lot, but like when he first got to campus, it was a big enough challenge to get him to show up on time for things. Okay. And so now what you see, there's been so much growth with him. Yeah. And he would be the first guy to admit that. But, you know, I think he has grown into one of the best leaders on our team. He's a guy who does literally everything right day in and day out, and is such like a positive example for young guys on the team, for everybody. And it's been super fun for me to watch him grow. And again, you look at, he's a perfect example of a guy who you will see him speak up when he sees something that's not being done as well as it could. He feels empowered to do that. He's really having a huge impact on our locker room, on our culture within the team. And, you know, you're super proud just seeing him grow, because you feel like even when football's done for him, he's going to be pretty successful, whatever he does now. And it's fun just to see that change and progression over time of guys.
It's interesting that, what I really heard from you is you're describing that. And I love that, you're highlighting, one of the players that has done it. But, it's that old OUA tagline, that they would talk about champions for life. It's really, like you said, empowering athletes, right? Coaches to become champions for life. Because really at the end of the day, yeah, we're talking football, but it's about helping them become a champion in all areas of life.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that a lot of times it's the unspoken thing that, as much as what we're working on is football, the things that you're trying to convey to the guys every single day. So like body language, effort, showing up on time, attitude, you probably don't say it as much as we should, but like a big part of that is that's what's ultimately going to make them successful, whatever they do. It's going to make them successful football wise as well. But whenever that's done, I think those core values, those attributes are what's going to make them successful in whatever they're passionate about and decide to pursue. And again, I think that one of the moments that makes you really proud and is cool is when you see guys who graduated from the program come back and they talk about carrying those lessons into whatever they're doing now. And they didn't necessarily understand at the time, but they see how those things have prepared them to be successful in whatever career they've chosen. And it's fun to hear that type of feedback.
Well, it's amazing, right? As you share that, I think back to all those times where, like you said, you bring back alumni, right? Because one thing I always talk about, the importance of celebrate your past and then create your future, right? And it sort of creates that hope of, you show someone that's been through it and now what they're doing. And then it's sort of, it's kind of like a pay it forward, right? So it's amazing sometimes how powerful those simple lessons can be.
Yeah, agree completely.
So I'm curious, Coach, again, we've been talking a lot about growth. And that was one of the things that really, caught my attention about you was, some of the ideas you're posting, like I love them, right? Like very growth-minded focus. Is there a habit for you that really allows you to be focused on growing as an individual, as a coach? Is there a habit that you really focus on that allows you to continually become a better version of yourself?
I don't know if there's like one habit in particular. I think the big thing for me, I genuinely love the work of doing that. Like I love learning about leadership and culture building, and I love learning about football. Like those things it's my passion. It's what excites me, and so I just genuinely love doing it. I think you're trying to build habits coming out of that. Like once you see what's important, okay, how can I put habits in place that will help me be successful at this? But honestly, a big part of it is you just fall in love with the work of like, how can I help create a better culture here? How can I be a better leader for these guys? How can, I teach something differently to put them in better position to be successful? So I think for anybody, that what makes it easy is that you genuinely just love the work. Like you fall in love with the process of getting better at it, and it makes it easy to do.
Okay. So I guess I'm curious here, is there a quality, a leadership quality that you really look for? Like if you're recruiting someone, is there this one quality, this one characteristic that you're like, okay, no, this is someone we need to recruit. They're a great leader. They'll be a great leader in the locker room. Is there something you look for?
I think so. Number one is definitely authenticity. I talked about that a little bit earlier, but I think that's critical. Like you want guys who they understand who they are. They know who they are. They're genuine. They're not trying to be somebody else. I think for the most part, student athletes, especially, they've got a pretty keen sense of when somebody's putting on a show. And again, as long as it's authentic for you and you care about people, like that comes across really well. Beyond that, I think just communication and work ethic are huge. And so you want guys who want to invest the time, put in the work to make themselves better. They're not just punching a clock, but they're going to do work as long as they need to in order to make something go. And they're going to hold themselves to a really, really high internal standard. So, it's kind of a football cliche, but if it shows up on film, you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. But it becomes very easy that's an easy one to do when you're winning or things are going well. But do you honestly believe that, internalize that when, you lose a game, when your position group isn't performing as well as they could? Are you genuinely looking at, okay, am I doing everything in my power to teach this in the way that they need me to, that comes across to them? And I think if you hold yourself to that standard, and you're willing to put in the work, and you can communicate with people and, be who you are, I think you'll end up in a good place.
Coach, I love the simplicity of like the know yourself. And, it's interesting that I think to a degree, I think we sometimes, at least from my own lived experience, we think we get to know ourselves. We think we know ourselves pretty well. And why that resonated with me is, when I just think of my own journey, right? Being, the head coach at a fairly recognized, high school in the country, and then taking a step back, I actually realized how little I knew of myself, right? Like I knew myself as a teacher. I knew myself as a football coach. And walking away from football actually challenged me to really get to know myself. And I know we were talking before you came on, you asked me about Football Ontario and my role there. I am actually better able to help and serve more athletes and coaches now because I truly understand more about myself. And the interesting thing, sort of tying it back to what you talked about, it was having to go through that adversity, some of that pain where I was like, who am I? Right. Right. And from there, it actually allowed me to get refocused and feel like this is the life path I need to go on. So it's interesting just how your ideas you were sharing sort of prompted me to reflect on my journey the last few years.
Yeah, I agree completely. I would suspect it's the same with a lot of people, especially where, most of us lived through an environment where we had football taken away for a season. So, I know for myself, it's the first year without football, I don't know, since before high school. And so it's been a huge part of a lot of our lives. And so when that's taken away, it makes you reflect and you spend some time thinking like, okay, who am I if football is taken away? And, I think a lot of people probably grew from that experience, and it helps put football in perspective. Between that, having a young daughter and everything now, it helps to give you some perspective when you're just young, starting out coaching. It seems like football is like the whole world, like it's the only thing that matters. And then again, like you have a daughter, you have to lose football for a year, so you got to spend a lot of time not doing that, which has been a huge part of your life up to that point. And it does put in perspective. You're not any less competitive about it. But you start to realize like, my daughter's not going to care if we win or lose. Like that's not going to change her opinion of me as a dad. We win the Yates Cup in 2019, and you just like want to get back and spend time with her. So it's fun. That's fun to have success, and you work hard for it, and you try to enjoy it a little bit, but it's not going to change who you are, how happy you are if you don't have the proper perspective on where things fit into your life.
I love that. It sounds, I love the fact that you said like having a daughter, right, really prompted you to shift your perspective at times, right? And it's interesting how those simple reminders and, just sharing on a personal note, my daughter sent me a message and it makes me feel, she sent me a message on my wife's phone and just saying, hey, love you, can't wait to see when you go home. And even just that simple message, it just reminded me like, this is the fun stuff, right? Like this is the stuff of life that really matters, right? And so I love that share.
Yeah, she can do a good job keeping things in perspective for sure. I mean, you can lose a game and the first thing she'll say is love you, dad. And then you can win a game and it doesn't matter. She wants you to go buy a new truck or something like that. So it just, the football piece is irrelevant if you don't have it in the proper perspective and you understand your priorities for sure.
Beside more time with your daughter, I'm curious, the last, couple of years have been interesting to say the least, right? And everyone's had their own unique experience, right? And everyone's dealing with it in a different way. I'm curious, what has been your biggest takeaway, besides like the importance of perspective?
It's a great question. I don't I feel like that's really it. Like I think
Okay.
over the last couple years, so starting out, like I got right into coaching as soon as I was done playing, and it was pretty all consuming
Yeah.
for a long time. And, even leaving Mount A after 2017, coming to McMaster, everything else. Now that you start to live some different experiences and different programs, everything else, you do realize, and especially as you spend some time away from it,
Mhm.
it does clarify that you love this, you're passionate about it. It feels like what you're supposed to do and we're meant to do. And you enjoy the fact that you feel like you're contributing to making people better. Um, but it's the same time, it is that perspective that I love this, but it's secondary. It's not going to make me happy in and of itself. It makes me happy from the standpoint of I love doing the work. I enjoy, the process of building a team and teaching guys and helping them get better. But winning an extra game every single year, or winning at any number of championships, or winning a Vanier Cup, any of those things, like none of that's going to make you happy in and of itself if you don't have your life in order away from that. So making sure that you prioritize family, your daughter, everything else, like, and not just family, but, relationships with friends and everything else that you sacrifice a lot of the time along the way. And again, because football can be such an all consuming thing, especially early on in your career, it's been fun to circle back and reconnect with some people that, frankly, you just weren't doing a good job keeping in touch with, right? Because life gets busy, you get caught up with what you're doing. And so having some time away to reconnect with those people has been good. And then you just realize, okay, like I love football, I love doing this, but I don't want to lose these other things that make me happy. So how can I make sure I have the proper perspective on things and keep it all in its place?
Mm. I love the simplicity of that message, Coach. And what I loved about that is, it just reminded me how all of us, from a young age are programmed that things outside of us will make us whole, right? Whether it's, a number on a scoreboard, right? A mark on a test, right? A job title, da, da, da. But really at the end of the day is you have to be able to be clear on what brings you joy, right? Like what gives you a greater sense of peace in your life, right? And it sounds like, for you, you talk about family, right? Making you feel like, the process of helping others reach their next level of greatness. So it's a great reminder that if you look outside of yourself for things to make you whole, the irony is you'll never feel whole. Like it always, the only way to feel whole is to really go within.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing that's going to make you happy. Like there is nothing outside of yourself that you're either going to be happy or you're not. And then those things are completely add-ons, but there's nothing you can attain. Like you can't achieve yourself to happiness. You do it because you're competitive and you love it, but you have to understand where the happiness comes from, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Coach, I know you've been sharing a lot about, what your purpose is, and one of my purposes is to truly, challenge people in a loving way. It's to help them understand of what's possible when they go all in, when they truly bet on themselves. So I always love stretching people. So I'm curious from you, what would, 10xing your life in any area, what would that look like? What would you want to see happen going forward, personally, professionally, coaching, what would you like to see happen in the next, 1, 2, 5, 10 years? What comes up for you?
That's a great question. I mean, this maybe isn't going to be the best answer for it, but I really try to think. So again, this goes back to Kelly, but he always talked about like, make sure your feet and your head are in the same place. And so I try not to think too far ahead. Everybody kind of has like goals, aspirations, things they want to achieve, that type of thing. But I really think it goes back to like the being process oriented. I try to think about like, what do I need to do today, this week, that type of thing. And I feel like if you keep the focus there, you end up in a pretty good place. So, I feel like I'm kind of weird with that. I don't have a ton of necessarily goals. I just try to think like, what do I need to do today? And if you keep working, you end up in a pretty good spot.
Okay, I love it. Again, that you can. What I'm really hearing from you and feeling from you again is that focus on the process. The results take care of themselves.
Yeah, agreed. And sometimes you think you know what you want to, and it's
Yeah.
not necessarily what you want either. So I think you just take like each opportunity as they come, independent of it, look at it, and you figure out what's better. Again, like there's a lot of things that have worked out differently than I thought they might have in my head. And for the most part, they've all worked out a lot better.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's the cliche of like things work out the best for people who make the best out of things work out. And so whatever it is, you just give it your all. And then whenever the next opportunity comes up, you deal with that whenever it comes.
Okay. I love that, Coach. So I'm curious, if any of our listeners, athletes, coaches, parents, really are intrigued by all what you're sharing. I know it's intrigued me. I love the way your mind works. What is, can people follow you anywhere? Can, if people have questions about McMaster and want to learn more, is there a way that they can connect with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, email, Twitter, probably the big ones there. So I think it's just coachsbrady@gmail.com or at Coach S Brady on Twitter, I think is my Twitter handle.
Okay.
But yeah, honestly, like, especially for coaches, like love having coaches come by like spring camp or, fall practices, as much as we can help out, especially high school coaches in the area, that type of thing. Like I just really enjoy talking football with people, talking leadership with people. And so I'm always available to engage in those type of conversations.
Okay, I love it. So, Coach, I really just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for, the great man you are, the great dad, the great significant other, right? The great teacher, coach, mentor, but most importantly, the amazing human being you are, Scott. The one thing I've really gained from this conversation is a reminder of really just falling in love with the process. Like, your ability to ask questions from a place of like just being calm and confident and just, asking those questions to gain some feedback as to where am I currently at is powerful. And so I really want to acknowledge you for the ability to be objective. And then also just that powerful reminder on how that really is so important in the game of life.
I appreciate it. Like I said earlier, I think the biggest thing, I've been pretty fortunate to be around some good people to ask those questions of. And I mean, it gets easier the more that you see like the impact getting those answers has. And I've been around some pretty smart people, so I've been pretty fortunate to get some pretty good feedback from people.
Okay, I love that. So, folks, here's my reminder to you. Knowledge is potential power. It's the consistent and focused application of that great knowledge that actually creates great results. Coach Brady dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed on the football field, but in the game of life. My challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And what I remind you every week in the huddle is that you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. So go do the work so you can achieve it. As always, I love having these conversations. My ask is if this conversation resonates with you, share it with someone that needs to hear it. Okay, because once we have more people starting to understand these simple ideas and putting them into practice, that's what's going to help others reach their next level of greatness. Have a blessed rest of your day, and I'll chat with you next time in the huddle.